Okay, it's Monday, April 21st, 2025, and we have some major breaking news just in.
Yes, Pope Francis has passed away. He was 88 years old.
The Vatican confirmed it happened at 7:35 a.m. local time this morning.
Mm-hmm. And this comes, after his last public appearance was Easter Sunday. He'd also just recently been discharged from hospital.
Right, that was a 5-week stay, wasn't it, for an infection?
Yeah, some sources specifying double pneumonia, so clearly he had been quite unwell.
So for this deep dive, we've gathered a whole range of initial reports from CNBC, AP, BBC Reuters, CNN, Arab News, Sky News Unheard, The Guardian, Al Jazeera. Quite a
A
list.
really global snapshot.
Exactly. And our goal today is, well, to understand these immediate reactions from around the world
Sure.
to his death, and also to maybe start unpacking the complexities, the controversies, too, that really marked his papacy.
So looking at that first wave of global response and what it tells us about how his legacy is being initially framed.
Precisely. So let's jump right into those global reactions. It seems like right off the bat, there's just been this huge outpouring of tributes.
Oh, absolutely. Condolences are coming in from leaders everywhere. It really shows the kind of influence the Pope has globally, doesn't it? Way beyond just the Catholic Church.
Definitely. We're seeing it from all sorts of figures, like U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance posted on X,
Hmm.
expressing sadness, mentioning you saw the Pope on Easter Sunday looking ill, and even recalling a specific homily from the early COVID days.
And the White House put out an official post, too.
Yeah, with photos of the Pope with President Trump and VP Vance.
It's interesting that mix of the personal reflection from Vance and the formal statement. It highlights how even political leaders felt some kind of personal connection, perhaps.
That's a good point. Then you've got the Dutch Prime Minister, Dick Schoof. He described Francis on X as, in every way, a man of the people.
That phrase seems to capture something essential about his style, doesn't it? Very direct, less formal, maybe.
Yeah, it keeps popping up. And King Charles in the UK, a statement from the royal family mourning a devastating loss.
Calling him a faithful follower of Jesus Christ.
Right, and remembering his compassion, his focus on church unity, commitment to common causes, and they just met him.
Just 2 weeks ago, yeah, during their Italy visit, that adds a real personal touch to the statement.
From Germany, Friedrich Merz, likely the next chancellor, offered condolences, highlighting the Pope's tireless commitment to the weakest in society, to justice and reconciliation.
Again, hitting on that core theme of his papacy. Social justice, the marginalized, that seems central to how many saw him.
Poland's President Duda praised his humility and modesty. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen echoed that on X
She mentioned his humility and love so pure for the less fortunate.
and pointed out he inspired people beyond the Catholic Church, too.
And that's key, isn't it? The recognition of his broader impact from leaders who aren't Catholic themselves.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog sent condolences, specifically mentioning the Christian communities in Israel.
And acknowledged the Pope's calls for peace in the Middle East for a Gaza ceasefire.
Yeah, that role as a voice for peace in conflict zones seems really noted.
It carried a lot of moral weight, certainly.
UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer called him a pope for the poor, the downtrodden and the forgotten, hailed his courageous leadership.
That description really sums up the image he projected, doesn't it?
And London's Mayor Sadiq Khan expressed sadness too, noting the large Catholic population in the city.
A reminder of the direct connection to communities worldwide.
Here, reactions from further out. India's PM Modi said he was deeply pained.
Poland's PM Donald Tusk remembered him as a good, warm, and sensitive man.
Egypt's President Sisi, a voice of peace, love, and compassion.
Just look at the range there, geographically, politically. It shows a kind of universal respect, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Spain's PM Sanchez hailed his commitment to the most vulnerable, his legacy for peace and social justice. Italy's PM Meloni mourned a great man, a great shepherd.
And she specifically recalled his call for courage to change direction towards cultivation, repair, protection. Shows his words resonated on a practical level, too.
East Timor's President Ramos Horta called it a tremendous loss for the world, not just Christians.
And he mentioned the Pope's visit there last September.
Said he left a profound legacy of humanity, justice, human fraternity. Clearly, that visit made a huge impact.
These papal visits often do leave a very lasting impression.
Even the Moscow Patriarchate acknowledged his role in developing contacts between the Russian Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches.
Which is significant given the often complex relationship there. It points to his efforts in, well, ecumenical dialogue, trying to bridge divides between different Christian traditions.
The Latin Patriarchate in Jerusalem is holding a Mass at the Holy Sepulchre. The Jesuits in Britain expressed gratitude for his leadership.
As a Jesuit himself, that's understandable.
And the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, described him as showing how to follow Jesus, highlighting humility, focus on the marginalized, wanting Christian unity.
These are voices from within different parts of the Christian world, all acknowledging his impact.
Even Ukraine's President Zelensky said Pope Francis knew how to give hope.
That's powerful, especially coming from a leader in the midst of war.
And on the ground in Rome.
Well, reports say the bells are tolling at St. Peter's Square. Crowds are gathering.
BBC describes, palpable shock, sadness, people from different countries talking about his inclusivity efforts.
It sounds like a really profound moment there, the passing of not just a leader, but someone who many felt a personal connection with.
So, okay, this first wave is overwhelmingly one of respect, tributes, acknowledgments of his impact. But we know it's more complicated than that.
Oh, definitely. His papacy wasn't smooth sailing internally. While he had this huge global popularity, especially championing social justice, supporting the marginalized, he also, as some reports put it, rattled the Catholic Church's most conservative quarters.
He was the first Jesuit pope, the first in the Southern Hemisphere. That alone signaled a change.
Right, and many progressives saw him as, a breath of fresh air, but conservatives often felt he was, well, abandoning tradition. There was fierce criticism.
But it wasn't just conservatives, was it? Some progressives felt he didn't go far enough with reforms.
Exactly. So you had this constant internal tension, a real contrast between that global popularity, the huge crowds on his trips, and the dissent bubbling away inside the church structure.
And one area where that tension, that criticism became incredibly sharp was the handling of the clerical sex abuse crisis.
Yes. A horrific legacy, the abuse itself and the cover-ups. It cast a very long, very dark shadow, and his approach was under intense scrutiny, often met with deep disappointment.
The AP report you shared is quite blunt about it. It details the Belgian Prime Minister, Alexander De Croo, publicly confronting the Pope during a visit.
Demanding concrete steps for truth, putting victims first, not the institution. Apparently, that kind of public challenge was a major break from Vatican protocol.
Wow. And it wasn't just him.
No, King Philippe of Belgium also raised the abuse issue and the forced adoption scandals, too. He insisted the church work incessantly to atone, to help victims heal. So really strong words from the highest levels in Belgium.
And the Pope met with survivors there.
Yes, 17 Belgian survivors. They shared their trauma, demanded reparations. Reports say Francis expressed remorse, begged forgiveness, promised prevention, calling it our shame and humiliation.
Similar apologies were made before, though, right? In Ireland, Canada.
And while apologies are necessary, the repeated calls for concrete action, like financial reparations, show that for many survivors and advocates, words aren't enough. They want tangible steps.
It wasn't just political leaders in Belgium either. The rector of Leuven Catholic University spoke out.
He did, told the Pope quite directly that the scandals had damaged the church's moral authority.
And suggested reforms, like women in the priesthood, LGBTQ plus inclusion.
Yeah, suggesting those could be ways to rebuild credibility. It's significant hearing that from within a Catholic university, linking the abuse crisis to these broader questions about the church's place in the modern world.
The context in Belgium is grim, too. AP reminds us Bishop Van Geloo was defrocked just this year for past abuse.
And that 2010 report, over 500 allegations, at least 13 suicides linked to abuse, plus the ongoing scandal of forced adoptions after WWII into the 80s.
It paints a really stark picture of why the reaction there was so strong.
Absolutely. It provides crucial context for those demands for accountability.
There's also that striking detail from CNN about Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, right at the start of Francis's papacy in 2013.
Ah, yes, handing him that large white box.
Filled with documents on abuse, corruption, wrongdoing, and apparently saying, now it's your turn.
What a moment. It really symbolizes the massive, deeply ingrained problems Francis inherited. Benedict basically put the burden squarely on his shoulders.
And yet, Francis himself wasn't immune to criticism on this front, was he? Unheard mentions allegations of him shielding some abusers.
Right. Specific cases like for Marco Rupnik, Bishop Gustavo Zanchetta, those controversies definitely fueled criticism.
Accusations that, despite the apologies, the action wasn't always consistent or decisive.
Exactly. How those situations were handled fed into that internal dissent we talked about and undoubtedly affected the very credibility he was trying to restore.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Arab News mentions Pope Francis warning about fanaticism, hatred on social media. It connects, in a way, to these divisions we're seeing. They often get amplified online, don't they?
Very much so. His awareness of social media's dark side shows he understood the modern landscape the church operates in.
So what happens now? Al Jazeera touches on the process, electing a new pope, the conclave.
Right, that usually happens a few weeks after a pope's death, gives time for mourning and for cardinals to travel to Rome.
And they need a two-thirds majority to elect the successor.
Correct. And this period in between is called the sede vacante. The see is vacant. The Camerlengo takes temporary charge of administration.
That's Cardinal Kevin Farrell currently, right?
Yeah. Yes. He manages day-to-day affairs, finances, but can't change doctrine or make major policy decisions.
And thinking about the next pope, Pope Francis appointed a lot of the cardinals who will be voting, didn't he?
A significant number, yes. Which naturally leads to speculation about whether his successor will continue his path or perhaps pivot in a different direction.
His appointments have definitely shaped the College of Cardinals. That will be a major factor.
No doubt. It sets the stage for the future direction of the church.
So as we wrap up this initial deep dive into the reactions and the context around Pope Francis's death, well, a few things stand out.
We've definitely seen this huge global wave of condolences. It underlines his stature on the world stage.
But alongside the tributes, there's this clear acknowledgement of a really complex, sometimes quite divisive papacy.
Marked by those reform efforts, yes, but also overshadowed by major scandals, especially the abuse crisis.
So his legacy, even in these first hours, is clearly being viewed through different lenses. A man of the people, the champion of the marginalized.
But also a leader who faced intense criticism over the church's past and his own handling of some very difficult issues.
Which leaves us with a final thought, really. With such varied reactions in this complex picture emerging, what will be the lasting impact of Pope Francis?
And perhaps just as importantly, what challenges lie ahead for the next pope, navigating all these different perspectives we've seen reflected in the news today, something for our listeners to consider.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the immediate global response and the intricate backdrop to the passing of Pope Francis.